Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well today. Today I'm going to talk about the Navpod install. It may end up being a lengthy video, but I'm going to cover a lot of things. I'm going to talk about the install of the actual pod, the screen I've used and how that's gone in there, power supply options, what I've had to do to make the screen work when I can't get access to things like the power buttons because it's then housed in the Navpod, and teething troubles and things I've subsequently had to rethink after having a period of testing. And it's not a fully finished deal in terms of being properly fitted, but hopefully I'll cover all of the questions that I've been asked over the last few weeks since my Instagram post. So stick with me and let's get on with it. So here we are with the screen fitted in. The screen I've used is a Samsung Tab 3 7-inch. It fits the housing that I purchased from CL Performance well. It certainly suits my needs and does everything that I want it to. I wanted an Android system because of the things that I wanted the screen to do. I'll link up to the corner here the issues that I had with putting this in there. It was by no means ideal, and for the money that this particular Navpod is being sold for, or that I've seen it's been sold for, I'm not sure what their current price is, but you're looking at comparable money there for an actual Toyota Navpod being shipped from Japan, depending on where you live. So that's perhaps something to think about. Having said that, if they didn't create this product, I probably wouldn't have one. So I am at least thankful for that. The Navpod itself, I will bond in at some point when I finished the testing phase of this. With any mod, sometimes you'll buy things that other companies have produced and it's just a case of fitting it, and that's fine. But when you're building things like this, you've got to expect some issues and some teething troubles. And what I didn't want to do is fix this thing in and then find I've got to dismantle the whole thing to deal with any issues. So when I'm finally happy with how it needs to be, I'll fit it in. So previously I've shown stripping this out, so I'm not going to cover that again. Now in terms of getting power to the back of the Navpod, it's just a case of drilling a hole here. There's a void behind this area here. I'm going to fit a grommet in there, although the plastic of the dash is quite thick, so I'm going to have to get a fairly deep grommet, because although it's plastic, over time I don't want any chafing to power cables. So what I did initially to ensure I could feed the cable up and through, that USB, it depends how big the hole you want to go is, that USB will just fit through there. Let's just zoom in a bit there, there we go. So a standard USB socket, I've made a hole that will just about fit through there fine. You'll get a small USB obviously through there easily, and I just poked a wire through. You'll find it easier if you take the glove box out to get access behind there, and that's fairly simple. It's just a case of drop it, and then I'm not going to pull this because I've only got one hand going and I'm not going to be able to undertake that, but you just basically, if you just flex I'll just do that one. Yeah, you can see it's just starting to come out. Just flex the two sides there, and that will then just drop out, and then it's sort of, you'll see it's very easy to remove it, and that gives you really easy access to the side section there. So on the back of the Navpod, it's not looking particularly pretty at the moment here. I have had to strip all of the rubber sheathing that you get around the USB port because of the proximity of the side of the pod to the side of the screen and where it has to fit in relation to ensuring that the whole screen is central to where I want it to be. I couldn't find a USB cable that would fit that, so I stripped that off. I did actually resolder that to make the solder unions stronger. You don't really have to do that, but where I was pulling cables about in sort of testing, I had broke one, so I remade this. Now I have bought a let me just close that there. I have bought a power supply. It's a it's either a 2.1 or a 3 amp power supply that initially was going to be hardwired into one of these switches, and then the power supply will come up through the back and into there. But for testing phases, what I've done is I've got just obviously a standard USB cable, mini USB or micro USB, this is cable, and initially I had that plugged into my Android head unit, but the Android head units, I think they only put out 500 milliamps. That is not enough to charge a tablet. So as the tablet was discharging, it then wasn't putting out enough power to be able to recharge it at a fast enough rate. I've got a USB socket on the front here, and that's 2.1 amps, and plugged into that it was no problem at all. Now a major thing that I had to overcome was the fact that once this thing is in there, you then have no access whatsoever to the power supply. No, power supply, what I'm talking about, to the power button, which then obviously gives you the issue of, well, how am I going to turn the thing on and off? How am I going to turn the screen off and things like that? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the camera down for a second. I'm going to put this back on the dash, and then we'll go through those things. Okay, here we are. So what I had to do, and I'm not going to give instructions of how to do that in this video, and I would probably have to think quite carefully as to whether I'm the right person to be able to provide those sort of instructions, because I was able to do it through instructions on the internet, and I was quite surprised how easy it is. But you are going to have to do what's called rooting the tablet. If you're going to use an Android tablet, you're going to have to root the tablet, because you need the accesses required to install certain apps on here to make it do things. So by rooting the tablet, what I was then able to do was modify the Android operating system, so when it gets a power supply feed, so basically when I turn the ignition on, and or if I hardwire it in here eventually, I turn one of these switches on. As soon as that's switched on, the tablet now, what it does is it starts charging. You get your normal battery or your charge indicator come up on the screen, and it would just normally stay at that. But I've now modded this, so what the tablet does is after about 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and it needs that length of time to get enough juice from a decent charge to be able to boot if the tablet goes completely flat. It's nice to have it boot up immediately, but the problem with that is that if you did that and the tablet goes completely flat, you're not going to get enough initial charge to be able to boot the tablet up to stay live without it just shutting down again, because it's not even got 1% charge. So you need to leave those sort of to 5-10 seconds for it to get an initial charge. So power comes on, 10 seconds, it then realizes from the changes to the operating system that I've made, oh, I've got to boot up, so it immediately switches itself on. So in terms of questions about does the screen come on with the ignition, yes it does. It does not switch off with the ignition. You have to manually switch that off, but I've got a workaround for that, because obviously you cannot access the power button to turn it off. So the side buttons, or the what are now side buttons, but they're the bottom buttons of this tablet. These buttons remain functional. The sensors here, in terms of light sensors and things, they remain functional, and there is enough screen on the edge visible here to be able to swipe down for notification bar options and things like that. So I think I'm going to have to zoom in a bit because this camera, although it is quite bright as I sit here, I have got it on, this is actually on battery saving mode, and I have got it on the sensors required, you know, the brightness optimization, as it were. So let's just turn that. Let's go back a second. Okay. So you can obviously customize your own lock screen. One of the things I have found, and it's not actually a problem in day-to-day use, but it is a problem in recording video, is because the screen is a gloss screen, which is lovely and looks lovely as a product, but in terms of trying to video it, it just becomes a mirror. But there is a certain amount of reflection, but it's not anything that gets in the way of using the screen. So lock screen is normal. I've got as a normal lock screen, and I've got a swipe to activate. So I will put a link in the description to this app that I use here. It replaces the normal graphic user interface for the tablet with this. So when it boots up, this is what it boots up to. You boot to the lock screen, swipe the lock screen, and this is what you get. So I've got Talk Pro, dash command, maps, and then I've got an app here to turn the screen off, so I don't need to use the power button. So I just press the screen off button and the screen goes off, and then obviously I can just press that button and then re-unlock the screen. You could turn the lock screen off and it just goes straight into that, but just for testing purposes I left that. And then there's another app here which I've installed for power, to give me all the power options. So for shutting it down, as I say, it doesn't shut off with ignition, because sometimes you might want to leave it on. You don't necessarily want the thing to shut down immediately. So if I touch that button there, and then if you have a look there, it gives me all of the reboot or power off options and things like that, and I can just hit power off and the thing will completely shut down. And then of course if I want it to come back on, then it's just ignition on and it will automatically boot up without any problem at all. I'll just back up there. And as I say, there is on this, yeah, I've set this so there is no notification bar, but you can have a notification bar if you wish, and you can add as many additional buttons along here as you want, but I've just kept it basic. This whole screen here is customizable. You can put all kinds of buttons on, you can move all this stuff around wherever you want it. It's really versatile, which is why I used it. It also comes with certain options for driving. It is a car specific graphic user interface. All these are adjustable. You can change these for different things depending on what you want to use. I'm not going to go too much into this app. If people want to know more about this app and its features, let me know in the comments, and I'll do another video to perhaps go over some of the things that I found with this app. Now I use the Navpod with my OBD-Link LX, which is this product here. It is a very good product. It's quite pricey. I did a video probably a couple of years ago now about this. I'll link to the top there for you if you haven't seen this. This does give faster reaction times. I'm primarily using this for gauges and navigation. I obviously do have the option for gauges and navigation down there, but not really ideal to be looking down below the dash when you're driving along, although obviously you get audible things as well. Much better for it to be up here. Now I will reiterate, as I look at this here, that may not look very bright, and you can obviously see the camera and reflections and all that kind of stuff. I can assure you, I'm trying to get it in a situation where that kind of gives a good representation. The screen is bright, and this screen isn't actually at its brightest setting. Power saving is on. I'll just see if I think what will happen here is that the camera will compensate for things. So if we turn off automatic brightness and just have full brightness level, and then we turn off power saving mode as well. Yeah, it's just compensating for it. But let me assure you, this screen is plenty bright enough for use. I've got no problems with viewing any of the gauges or anything at all. It works really well. So I've got, as I say, I've got torque and dash command. Torque I'm familiar with, and I know how to use and program quite well. That's pretty functional. It's got a lot of good stuff on it. I've also bought dash command because some of there's hundreds of what's called dashboards. You can get these different dashboard designs. Some of those are excellent, and if you'd seen my video on Instagram when I was sort of testing out some gauge options for this install, you know, they're just beautiful looking gauges, some of them, and something I'd like to do is learn how to program my own gauges so I can make an MR2 specific gauge system. So what we'll do then is we'll plug in the OBD link, and we'll start the car and just show you some of the gauges and how that works and things like that. So just bear with me, and I'll put the camera down, get the car started, and we'll have a look. Okay, so hopefully you can still hear me okay with the car running there. So we'll just open torque to begin with. I'm not going to enable the GPS at this time. So it will start trying to connect to OBD. And there we go, and that's how quickly the system connects. The acceleration PID is not correctly, it's not the correct one. I've got to set this up for acceleration. I'm not sure if our ECUs on the MR2 support that, so I might change that to something else. But in terms of responsiveness of the gauges, I found that OBD Link LX OBD2 dongle is the quickest one that I've used personally. I've got a couple of the cheap Chinese ones, and don't get me wrong, they're brilliant, and for the money, I mean, the value is just phenomenal. But what I have found is that they're just not as quick as that OBD Link. You know, I guess that's part of the reason as to why you're paying the money that you're paying. So the ECU doesn't update overly quickly, although it's several times a second. So if I just rev, and if you have a look at the sort of rev gauge there, you'll probably hear the revs, and then you'll see the responsiveness of it. So it's just sort of a millisecond behind. So if you need this in terms of like absolutely on the money type situation in terms of data feedback, you're possibly going to be looking at, well, you'll have to change the ECU, because this ECU doesn't provide data that quick enough out of it. But for my purposes, it's perfectly fine. You can set up multiple gauges on Torque Pro. I haven't done that. I've only set up these gauges for the time being, and that's cool. So if we just come out of there, come out of there again, exit, okay, and then if we go into dash command, dash command takes slightly longer to load, but I think that's because it's got more graphical, see, and that is connected as quick as that, and now it's you know, it's the speed at which this tablet and that OBD OBD Link LX works. They connect really quick, which is one of the benefits for me. Yeah, so in terms of gauges, it comes with standard set of gauges, which do look quite good. You know, this is the fuel one. This is sort of general stats, driving stats. Just zoom in there, you get you know, sort of speed, all this sort of good stuff. I think this is data that was saved from a previous run. Just come out here, then you've got this different one here for coolant intake temperature, math, all that kind of good stuff. And then you've got gear shift, and I haven't entered the drive ratios and things in here yet for the car. So when I have, we'll have a look at that and see how accurate that perhaps is. But so if you press the back button on that, this is the sort of main screen. There's this sort of skid pan thing, which is G settings and things like that. And then you've got gauges, and you've got a sort of built-in set of gauges that comes with this. These are all customizable as well. You can change all these. Yeah, so there's gauges. There's a performance tab, so that might perhaps be good for track days and things like that. Data grid. I'm just going through this to show you what it is. I am by no means an authority on how to use this software. I'm just getting to grips with it myself, but it does give you an idea of the sort of things that you can do with it. There's on both Torque Pro and Dash Command, there's standard diagnostic stuff, and it does the checks very quickly. And then there's vehicle data, so you choose your vehicle, and obviously this is set up for the MR2. So on the dashboards, that's the standard dashboard. If you long press on it, you come up with this. You can also select it from the settings. So if we select dashboard, and I've got a couple installed here, so if we go for the GTR gauges, that's and then that'll swap out in a second. Now this the GTR gauge here, this has actually been set up for a GT86, so I'm going to have to play around with this to get the gauges functioning for the MR2, but you kind of get the idea of how these can look when they're properly set up, and this is sort of what sold me. When I drove a GTR R35, I literally fell in love with the screen with the gauges on. I really like that. So yeah, that looks really good. So once I've set all these up, and I may need some assistance, so if there's anybody in the MR2 community watching this who knows how to program this, I would really appreciate your help, for not just for me, because obviously I like working gauges, but for the community, so anybody who wants to undertake this project can have a set of functioning gauges in this way. So certain gauges on this work and certain ones don't, but you can customize, or you change the gauges out, do all kinds of crazy stuff with it. It's a very versatile system. If we change, I've got a different GTR 35 one here. There's so many of these to download, there really are. so I'll change to a different one. And on this one, the readouts are, instead of the grey, there's like a the red readout. Yeah, so yeah. And then obviously maps is self-explanatory. The tablet obviously has GPS sensor in there, so you know it works fine for maps and things like that, and it's pretty much versatile for anything that I want to do with it. I've not bothered with any music or anything on this because I have this Android system here and I've got Spotify on. I do use my phone as a hotspot for this as well, so it has full internet along with the let's turn that off before I get a content strike. So I do have full internet functionality with GPS and all that good stuff, so you know this has really opened up some possibilities for screens and checking of data and how the car's operating as it's being driven, things like that. And it really fulfills my desire for gadgets in my car. So you know, just on the basis of well, why have you gone to all this effort? Well, because it's cool and I really like it. So yeah, I'm not really sure what else to cover at this time. I'll be guided by you. So leave me a comment in the comments section if you've got any further questions about how this install has gone. Well, one thing someone did say is, how does it react to the heat? So I've only had and now I live in the UK, so it's not particularly hot. So if you're abroad, if you're in, say for example, the US, and you live in, I don't know, California or somewhere, then that potentially is going to be a consideration for you. So the only problem I had with this during testing over the last few days has been, we had a really hot day over the last weekend. When I got in the car, it was something like 45 degrees in the car. Obviously this is a black unit. You know, the sun was beating down on it. The unit worked fine, it operated fine. The only thing it didn't do is, and I have this with my phone as well, if I use my phone in the Jeep and it's on its mount on the screen, if it gets too hot, the battery will just stop charging. It will come up with a notification saying the unit's too hot, so battery charging has been turned off. So I kind of stress tested the unit to see if it would still operate. Now obviously us as humans, it's not comfortable sitting in an environment at 45 degrees, and it wasn't that for particularly long. Let me just turn this engine off. It wasn't that for particularly long because obviously I had you know, the ventilation AC going and stuff, and then it was fine. But bearing in mind that was when the car had been sitting in the sun all day. I didn't take it out until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so it had the hottest part of the day on it. Yeah, so that's the only problem that I found, that the battery charging turned off. And then as soon as the car and the interior cabin cooled down, that then operated fine, and charging then recommenced. So yeah, so that was one thing that someone asked me. So any questions, let me know in the comments. You know, if you're looking to do a similar project, you know, the whole purpose of these is to help everybody out. You know, I'm not precious about, oh, this is my project, blah blah blah. You need some help, just let me know. You know, I'll be as helpful as I can to you in terms of how I've done anything, if I haven't covered anything on this install. This will eventually, as I say, the Navpod will be glued down. This will be bonded in from the back with silicone. It's pretty solid as it is at the moment, but just for, you know, belt and braces as it were, I just want to glue it in essentially. And I'm now, where I was talking about the power supply options, what I'm now thinking of doing is having the power supply from this switch going to perhaps a 10,000 milliamp hour power supply, and then I'm going to possibly fit this behind the dash, and then with the USB lead coming from this to the unit. Now the reason for that is this: if I want to plug that unit in for any reason to put drag data on or off it, I don't want to have to pull the unit apart or pull it out when I've, you know, essentially bonded it all in, to then access the, you know, USB ports and stuff. So that would then give me the option to be able to connect to the tablet from a data point of view with my laptop or things like that, without the need to pull all that apart. And it gives me the best of both worlds for charging this. That'll be a sort of like power storage unit, if you like, to supply that, but also I get the USB access to be able to plug that unit in. Yeah, so that's another thing that I've thought about subsequently, instead of just having hardwired power straight into the unit. So thanks for putting up with my waffling. I hope you found this video useful. This project has been a long time coming. It's pretty much at its fruition now. I'm just sort of ironing out these last sort of things, and probably in the next few days I'm going to be bonding that in. So yeah, have a great rest of your day or evening whenever you're watching this video, and you know, give us a like if you've liked the video, or subscribe or share to any of the MR2 communities of people you think might be interested in this project. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.